Was the first season of the Pro Tour a success? Who knows? As we covered last time, the inaugural Player of the Year award was won by Ole Rade, who was 17, not 16, when he won Pro Tour Columbus, as seen here. Ole Rade winning Pro Tour Columbus in the first Player of the Year title was significant for a couple reasons. For starters, it signified that the game's appeal transcended US borders. Magic was made and produced in the States, but here's this 17-year-old Swede kicking everyone's teeth in. How many more Ole Rades were out there in Europe or Asia waiting for their shot? So, for the second season of the Pro Tour, Wizards of the Coast, wanting to capitalize on the potential of a broader market, took their Pro Tour international. The 96-97 season also introduced Grand Prix, the plural of which is actually Grands Prix, but that sounds dumb as hell, so I'm just gonna say it wrong for the rest of time. Grand Prix are sweet. The big cash tournaments that are open to the public, allowing amateurs to rub elbows with professionals on the gravy train of the Pro Tour to see where they stand. In future seasons, GPs would award pro points in order to incentivize pros to attend and maintain their standing on the Pro Tour gravy train. They don't exist anymore, in any form. C'est la vie. Season 2 of the Pro Tour began in Atlanta, Georgia on September 13th, 1996. The format was Mirage Sealed Deck, which at that time meant opening one tournament pack, 2 booster packs, building a 40-card deck out of whatever you opened, and playing it against other folks who did the same thing. The twist, as if opening randomly seeded packs and trying to make it all work wasn't already enough of a twist, was that this Pro Tour served as the Mirage pre-release. No one had ever seen these cards before, and everyone was expected to make it work on the fly. Technically, Mirage was the first set designed for limited play, but if you look closer at Mirage, there's some funky stuff going on. The biggest red flag that something was amiss was Keravex Torch at common. Throughout Magic's history, there are a lot of fireballs, which makes sense because Fireball kicks ass, combining math nerd stuff like a variable with the mechanic of slinging a giant ball of fire. Even within the context of the game, Fireball is uniquely satisfying to cast because it scales throughout all phases of the game, whether you have 4 mana or 7 or 26. You'd be hard-pressed to not find an application for a Fireball, so they kept making new ones. First, there was Lava Burst, which eventually gave way to Keravex Torch. Between Torch, Torrent of Lava, Volcanic Geyser, and Savage Twister, red was the best color in Mirage by miles and miles. There was no balancing out all those X spells. You either played red or you lost. The keywords of Mirage were flanking and phasing. Flanking's pretty inoffensive. Whenever a creature without flanking blocks a creature with flanking, the non-flanker gets -1/-1 before damage gets dealt. Phasing is way weirder, and I frankly have no idea why they brought it back, but I'm obligated to try and explain it. Alright, so here's an idiot with phasing. On rate, this dummy's actually pretty good, but it has phasing. Okay, so when you untap, but before you untap, if this thing's on the battlefield, it phases out, which means nothing. Okay, so when a creature is phased out, it's not really on the battlefield, but it's not really anywhere else either. It's just phased out. No one gets to touch it or mess with it in any way. For all intents and purposes, it's not in play. Then, on your next untap step, it phases back in. So now it's back on the battlefield, but it's treated like it never left. It doesn't have haste, but it can attack now. So let's put a +1/+1 counter on it with Afia Grove and attack for 7. Cool. On our opponent's turn, they put a pacifism on it, and now it's our turn again. And hey, look! Sandbar Crocodile's phasing out, which means the pacifism's gonna fall off, right? Wrong, you idiot! Both the pacifism and the +1/+1 counter phase out with the Sandbar Crocodile. Adoy! I'm just kidding. While this functionality opens up some cool design space, the keyword itself is really, really unintuitive. I'm sure the judge calls from this tournament were absolutely hysterical, but they have unfortunately been lost to the sands of time. Speaking of judge calls, here's an interesting one from the top 8. In the quarterfinals, Terry Borer squared off against Darwin Castle. As the story goes, Castle cast Armor of Thorns targeting his own skulking ghost. Turns out that isn't a legal play, let alone a good one. In a decision that feels arbitrarily harsh considering these people are effectively playing a pre-release, the head judge ruled that both the Skulking Ghost and the Armor of Thorns would go to the graveyard. That head judge was Tom Wiley, who you might recognize as the head judge of Pro Tour Columbus the year before. He's the one who offered to pause the Pro Tour finals so a side event could finish up. This isn't the last we'll hear from Tom Wiley. Recaps of limited tournaments are rarely interesting, and Pro Tour Atlanta is no exception. Germany's Frank Adler won the Pro Tour, beating future Hall of Famer Darwin Castle in the finals. Okay, I love watching old Magic footage as much as the next person, but take it from me, this is unwatchable. The booth doesn't really know what's happening, they're both playing glacially slowly, and it's sealed deck. They haven't done a sealed deck Pro Tour since. Next up, Pro Tour Dallas. Standard. These are the legal sets. These cards are banned. These cards are restricted, meaning you can only put one copy in your deck. They don't restrict cards in Standard anymore. Because this is a tournament from 1996 that wasn't the first ever Pro Tour, as far as I can tell, only 4 deck lists exist today because, for whatever reason, no one at Wizards of the Coast cares. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but stay with me for a sec. Wizards of the Coast could do videos like this. They could do them easily, and with all the primary resources at their disposal, those videos would be sick. But for some reason, they just seem to not give a shit about the history of their flagship game. In an industry where longevity is an effectively insurmountable market advantage, the attitude of Magic's very publishers towards the long, storied history of their own product can most charitably be described as ambivalent. That is the only explanation for why, the majority of the time, the existing coverage archive of a Pro Tour from the 90s consists of only a final standings sheet. No deck lists, no narratives, no statistics, nothing. That's all stuff they had at the time, and hell, maybe it exists now. But it's impossible to find. WotC's recklessness with and ultimate shuttering of the Pro Tour brand reinforces the notion that maybe, just maybe, caring about this stuff is a fool's errand. On the other hand, the privilege of getting to choose what you care about is just that. So let's continue. The days of Pro Tour 1 were very clearly over. There could be no mistaking that Necropotence, our old buddy, the recipient of a 1-star review from Inquest magazine, was the tentpole that the Standard metagame wrapped itself around. The decks we do have access to serve as some insight into 3 players' best guess as to how to build around the card. Chris Pikula's deck only played 3 copies of Necropotence, but the skull served as more of a complement to a beatdown plan than anything else. A red splash featuring 4 lightning bolts, 3 incinerates, and a fireball probably served Pikula well against other Necropotence decks attempting to use their life as a resource. And sideboard shatters provided fast answers to ubiquitous aggro hosers like Ivory Tower and Zurin Orb. Fast answers that the mono-black builds sorely lacked. Pro Tour Dallas was the first time, but not the last time, that Brian Hacker would top 8 a Pro Tour with an aggressive deck. Hacker and Pikula's decks are from a similar school of thought, but instead of splashing red, Brian Hacker went all in on creatures, sporting a total of 19 of them, 15 of which are 2-drops, alongside 4 copies of Bad Moon. But it was tournament winner Paul McCabe who went a more traditional direction, which allowed him to play Demonic Consultation to find Necropotence more often. Sure, he only played 2 copies, but what do you expect? It was 1996. Next up, Pro Tour Los Angeles. The format was Mirage Vision's Rochester draft, which is closer to fantasy sports drafting than traditional Magic drafts. Each person at the table still has 3 packs, but in Rochester draft, packs are opened face up one at a time. Whoever opened the pack gets first pick, and then players take turns going clockwise around the table, selecting 1 card at a time. The last player to pick, known colloquially as the wheel, gets to take 2 cards, and drafting resumes counterclockwise until the pack is empty. Rochester draft isn't a thing anymore because drafting 24 packs one at a time takes forever. Fast forward to the finals between Tommy Hovey and David Mills. Throughout the top 8 and likely the entire tournament, David Mills had been tapping his lands after declaring his spells, not before. Technically against the rules, but to be perfectly clear, a completely arbitrary distinction. So he racked up warnings from judges, but this is how he learned the game, a game that at this point is still only 4 years old. Also, the internet doesn't really exist yet, so a sequencing gaffe as inconsequential as that probably shouldn't even be on a judge's radar, considering how much actual cheating went on back then. So, David Mills is in the finals, up 2-1, thanks in large part to an understanding of tempo that set him far apart from his peers. While most of his contemporaries were happy to cast Jungle Worms or play towards a 12-point Keravex Torch, David Mills was busy, capitalizing on all the cards we now understand as completely busted, cards like Mana War, Memory Lapse, and Undo. These days, the word tempo means whatever you want it to mean, but in 1997, that was the only way to classify David Mills' playstyle, and he was truly playing above the rim. Up 2-1 in the finals, Mills was a bit pinched on mana in the deciding game, only to draw a critical swamp on the last turn of the game before his window of opportunity slammed shut. Mills excitedly played his swamp, then cast some black card, who knows, without tapping his lands beforehand. It was then that David Mills was informed that he would be disqualified from Pro Tour Los Angeles without prize by none other than Tom Wiley. Well, we're finally here. You knew it was going to get to this point. If you're trying to give an intellectually honest recap of Magic in the 90s, you're going to have a hard time not using the C word. Back then, cheating was just part of the fabric. Everyone did it and accused each other of doing it. Depending on who you talk to, even the most vociferous anti-cheating advocates weren't above slipping an extra lava burst into an Ice Age sealed pool every now and again. An understated facet of why cheating sucks is how it attritions a judging staff. By the time you're done fielding a bunch of bad faith judge calls made by obvious cheaters who choose to cover their tracks by layering in the bare minimum amount of charisma, you are tired. In perfect conditions, it's obvious that David Mills wasn't trying to gain some sort of edge with his technically out-of-order sequencing, but judges don't operate in perfect conditions. They operate in Magic tournaments. I'm not hand-waving away Tom Wiley's actions here. From my perspective, Wiley's willingness to deliver such arbitrarily harsh rulings suggests that he was mostly ambivalent about his role of ensuring that Magic tournaments yielded legitimate results. When the Pro Tour result reached the players in the hall, Mark Justice, one of Magic's earliest poster boys, literally stormed the main stage and led a player revolt that ultimately resulted in David Mills receiving his prize money but still being disqualified. Lest you think that Mark Justice is some sort of champion of the people, rest assured that in less than a year from now, he will be disqualified from a Grand Prix for putting a 4th muscle sliver in his draft deck. Judges will find that one of his muscle slivers is shaded differently than his other 44 draft cards, meaning that it is from a different print run. When confronted with this reality, Justice will confess that he bought the muscle sliver from a dealer to replace a pack-defected one that he threw away. When judges ask where he threw it away, Justice will not remember, prompting the judges to offer to help him look through all the trash cans in the hall for the muscle sliver. Faced with diving around in convention center garbage cans for a card that doesn't exist, Justice chooses disqualification. During day 1 of that same Grand Prix, Mark Justice squared off against Mike Long. At some point during the match, Long intentionally knocked over the die keeping track of his life total, bent over to pick it up, and wouldn't you know it, they now had a life total discrepancy that reportedly took judges nearly 30 minutes to sort out. And they ended up going with Justice's written record. Justice immediately won the match on the back of 2 burn spells, prompting him to remark to Long that, wow, I guess this proves they really do hate you after all. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the last of these 2 clowns. The format for Pro Tour Paris was block constructed like Pro Tour Columbus the year before. This time it was Mirage Block, which consisted of Mirage and Visions. Combo decks had been a thing since Magic was invented thanks to Channel and Fireball, but Pro Tour Paris marked the first time that a deck narrowly focused on winning the game with a precise combination of cards did so on the game's biggest stage. Mike Long's plan was simple, win with a Drain Life, but his route to lethal damage was convoluted yet explosive. Squandered Resources allows you to sacrifice land for additional mana, while Cadaverous Bloom allows you to exchange cards in hand for mana. Once you had the 2 enchantments in play, winning was a matter of casting a Natural Balance and sacrificing all your lands in response, then sacrificing the lands you got with Natural Balance, then casting Prosperity, cashing in all the cards you just drew for more mana, casting another Prosperity, and essentially drawing your entire deck until you had enough cards in hand to fire off the lethal Drain Life. Sequences like this are found in Magic all the time, but in 1997, on this level of play with such a narrow pool of cards to choose from, Mike Long's Prosperous Bloom deck was pretty radical. Decks like this are now classified as combo decks, and if you play a non-rotating format, you'll see plenty of them. The match between Mike Long and Mark Justice deserves its own video, so I'm not going to cover it here, but suffice it to say that this was the tournament that made Mike Long a Pro Tour champion. Next up, Pro Tour New York, and if this feels like a lot of Pro Tours, it's because it is. Including the World Championships, the 96-97 season had 6 Pro Tours, where most seasons had 4 or maybe 5. Not only that, but Pro Tour New York marked the 3rd consecutive month with a Pro Tour. Mushing so many tournaments so close together had its drawbacks. The format for Pro Tour New York was 5th edition Visions Draft, probably because they'd just done a Mirage Visions Draft Pro Tour 2 months earlier, and Weatherlight wouldn't come out for another— Wait! It comes out next week? What the hell? All the problems with 4th edition were largely unresolved in 5th. 2 X-Spells at Common? Check. All 5 Circles of Protection? Check. At a whopping 449 cards, 5th edition is the largest Magic set ever released, even edging out Time Spiral, despite the fact that Time Spiral had a whole nother rarity sheet baked into the set. Why did they make 5th edition so big? Nobody knows. The set had 3 developers, which is comically few. With a team stretched so thin, there were bound to be a few oversights. And there were a few oversights. Doesn't matter. Nothing about this Pro Tour exists anyway. On to Worlds, where, guess what? 4 deck lists exist. You know what? This sucks. I'm out of here. See you next year.